I'm Dermot Hussey. Welcome to the YouTube channel for the podcast Riffin Radio. Engineer and producer Richard Alderson arguably gets more press for the fact that he was the recording engineer for Bob Dylan's famous Gaslight tours of 1962 than the fact that he's recorded a who is who list of artists, names like Roberta Flack, Nina Simone, Bill Withers, Grover Washington Jr., Johnny Nash, Muddy Waters, just to name a few. I spoke to him about Harry Belafonte. Richard, you began working with Harry Belafonte in 1963. In what capacity?
As a live sound person, and I had all my own speakers, and the rest of the equipment is from the previous owners. And he was unique in that he carried his own sound with him and had it written into his contract.
Why was that? I find that very unusual as against rented equipment.
It's completely unusual. And he put on a great show. He had an enormous stagecraft, an enormous amount of lighting and sound and all of that. And the first concert that I did with him was in the Round in Connecticut, and I remember it. And I used my speakers, which were cumbersome and bulky. And after that, I had Harry buy some smaller ones because they weren't adequate to fill. They were adequate for this tent in Connecticut, but they weren't adequate to fill most of the halls. They were small, really acoustic speakers. And all the music was acoustic, so there wasn't a problem. And there wasn't a problem in the Round because everybody was in front of a speaker. Mm-hmm. And my speakers were light. They were large and light. And they had to be hung, but they were easy to hang.
Could the audience of that period recognize the difference in the sound reproduction that they were getting?
They knew that they were going to a great show, but they were coming to see Harry. You know, that's who they came to see. And I was more interested in his guest artists, Miriam Makeba and Hugh Masekela. And Hugh Masekela became my close friend at the time. And I never really relinquished it, but we grew apart in time. But he used to come to my house, and I had a reed organ, which was his first instrument, believe it or not. You activated with your feet, and it had like harmonica resonators, very similar to harmonica, but much bigger. And he played it in church.
Harry Belafonte was really responsible for introducing both Makeba and Masekela to the American audience. What was the impact that they had at that time?
It was enormous because nobody had ever seen any African performers, and they were the cream of the crop. Miriam was the best singer, probably of all time, of Africa, and Yui Masekela was the best instrumentalist.
You also sorry, go ahead.
Trumpet player, but he played many instruments. He was multiple instrumentalist.
You also worked with Harry Belafonte as a sound producer on the ABC special, which was called Sound of Laughter. It was considered a groundbreaking show. In what way?
Well, it was very unusual at the time, and it was written by some West Indian writers. I don't know who they were. I don't remember their name, but they're long gone. But the main crux of the show was that Black laughter or Negro laughter originated on slave plantations, which of course it did. And the thread was lost back to Africa, but modern Negro comedy was all based on slave plantations. And the opening of the show was a light-skinned Negro actress being roasted in a pot by white cannibals in the jungle, and nobody cared that, neither blacks nor whites. And I thought it was very funny, and it was intended that way, but nobody got it.
Neither the critics or the audiences.
Nobody got it. The audience and the critics didn't get it. And it was Diane Carroll, I believe. There were so many people in the show that I have difficulty remembering all of them. But everybody that became known to the general audience in the United States was on that show. Red Fox, Richard Pryor, Godfrey Cambridge, etc. Mom's
All the
Maid.
names.
Yeah.
Are there any more sequences of that show that come to mind?
Well, I did a bunch of pre-recording of the music because the musical director of Harry Belafonte organization was a close friend of mine. And he did a lot of pre-recording of the music and wrote the songs, and they existed on the slave plantations, and they were demonstrated that way. And nobody got it.
Oh boy.
But the network executives got it because Red Fox and Richard Pryor and Godfrey Cambridge went on to enormously successful careers after that. I loved the Godfrey Cambridge show.
What was it like to work with Harry Belafonte? Was he a hard taskmaster? What kind of person was he to work with?
I was more interested in the political aspects of his work. And that was complex and varied, but he was so buttoned down in the stagecraft that I just slipped in seamlessly to the whole thing, and I had very good equipment. And because somebody preceded me in providing this live sound for Harry, I just followed them. So it was extremely easy, and he wasn't a difficult tax master at all. And he was very fussy about the sound of it, but I always provided good sound, so I didn't have a problem with him. And I remember that at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles, which was outside, we would have trouble when there was an intense fog, which there would be occasionally, and the sound would become muffled and indistinct in relation to a clear day. And Harry would always ask me, "What happened to the sound today, Richard?" And I would say, "The fog." And I couldn't do anything about it. And because the whole theater was enveloped in fog. But the good thing about the Greek Theater is that they were unique in that they had the sound booth in the middle of the staging area and in the audience area. And at this time, the mixer, live mixer for the show is very often in the middle of the show. But at that time, they would just put him anywhere, and he couldn't hear the sound. And I couldn't hear the sound, except at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles, where they had the booth in the middle of the audience area. And that's the way it was built.
If you had a chance to work with Harry Belafonte again, what would you choose to do? Are there any albums that you'd like to see him do, or are there albums, for instance, that might have been in the can that he could finish?
Yes, I would recommend that he finish the real Calypso album that we made in the studio. And he never related to that because his showmanship was very much an amalgam of Calypso and jazz and Jamaican music and all Western music mixed in together. And it was based on ballads, and all the Calypso music was very up-tempo and had the steel pan, or steel drum as it's known, at the forefront. And this was a foreign object to Harry, whose instrumentation was guitars and acoustic bass and maybe an electric piano or an acoustic piano, but all acoustic, and a chorus and a percussionist, and that was it. He never varied from that. And during the period of time I was working with him, and I don't think he ever varied from it in the future. But I don't know, because I have not attended any later concerts with Harry. When I stopped, I stopped.
One thing that I recently learned was that you went to Jamaica. Johnny Nash took you to Jamaica. Tell us about that. I found that very fascinating.
Well, as a result of my working with Harry, I became very friendly with Johnny Nash and his arranger, Arthur Jenkins, because Arthur had done some arranging for Harry. And one day, Johnny asked me if I would like to go to Jamaica, and I didn't know anything about it in Jamaica. And we went to Jamaica, and it was very primitive. We were at Federal recording in the big warehouse, and it was Lynn Tate and his
Jets. And the Jets.
Yes. And it was all acoustic, and it was in a big room, and the reverb was all natural. And I think we recorded everything 2-track there, and then overdubbed all the instrumentation and chorus and strings in the United States, and also Johnny's vocals. But the only thing we did in Jamaica was Lynn Tate, and we did a lot.
Did you interact? Did you meet Bob Marley at that time?
Yes. Yeah. At the same time, Bob Marley was appearing as it was during the period when Rastafarianism was just becoming a reality. And the first time I saw Bob Marley, he had on a suit and a little thin tie, and so did the rest of the band, and the I3s were all dressed in normal clothes. There was none of the Africanness or the dreads or anything. And he was on an amateur show on Saturday, and I was completely bowled over by his talent, and so was Johnny. And so Bob Marley came to the house, and Mortimer Planter came with him. And they all spent a lot of time with Johnny Nash.
Richard, thank you so much for sharing these memories with us, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay.
Take care.
Forward to it too.
Bye for now.